Hey guys, welcome to Project Build. Today we're going to have a look at Blake's 2.7 that he's building for our 2.7 build off challenge. So we're building 3 of them between Blake, Barry, and myself. We're going to put together 3 totally different 2.7 builds, and then we're going to race them and do a couple of competitions and see who does a better job for the money and who does a better job overall in terms of building a 2.7. So Blake, we're having a look at your 2.7 build here. We've all kind of gone a different route with our 2.7s, so let's talk about some of the things that you've done with your car, maybe a little bit differently. First of all, let's talk about the chassis. Which car is this going into?
So we're putting this into a 2006 A4 Avant. That was a 3.2 originally with automatic transmission, and I've ripped all the drivetrain out already, and we're dropping the 2.7 with a manual transmission gearbox into it.
So for those that don't know the years, this would be the B7 chassis, right?
Correct, yeah. B7, a little bit different from the B6, but essentially they're almost all the same.
So we've got here a 2.7, you picked this up. This was originally a manual motor? Or was it an automatic originally?
I actually can't even remember. I think it was a manual originally. It's been so long, to be honest.
Is there any differences that we know of in terms of the crank?
No, I don't think so, because the 2.7, the pilot bearing rests in the flywheel versus in the crank like your 1.8s, and that's where you get that difference of automatic to manual. Your pilot bearing is in that crank, and there's different pilot bearings between the two. So the 2.7 doesn't really matter, I don't think. The only thing that matters is when it comes to your ECU and what you're flashing it for, and you can flash it out or change the coding from automatic to manual.
Right. So in terms of bottom end, have you done anything in the bottom end other than basic maintenance stuff?
Yeah, just maintenance. Replaced the rear main seal, the oil pan gasket, a bunch of gaskets at the front for the oil cooler. I left it completely stock, so stock rods, stock pistons. I didn't want to mess around with that. I took the heads off just to have a look and inspect at the valves, make sure that everything was sealed and looked okay and there's no contact, because I'd never heard the motor run before, so I just checked all that out. So with that, you know, new gaskets and everything on the front, and all new timing belt and everything kind of coming all the way up. Just doing all the maintenance stuff. Every seal essentially has been replaced. Want to make sure it's not leaking, and that's it. Yeah, so stock 2.7 heads as well. I didn't mess around with those at all, and that's kind of it for the bottom end.
So in terms of your front covers here, I noticed the arrangement's a little bit different because the stock 2.7 would have a mechanical fan for the radiator, and that would be coming out of this area, I guess?
Yeah, so common thing for guys to do on the 2.7 is to delete that mechanical fan, especially when you're dropping it into a B6 or B7, because you have electric fans that can take on that load that this would be, I guess, shedding. And so yeah, so I've got a little delete plate. This comes from some other V6s, kind of a hard plate to find. It only came on select, I can't remember the designation where they came from. But anyway, so you delete the mechanical fan, put this little shroud in, and I'm actually using the stock belt as well. So the fan comes around here and kind of pushes the belt out a little bit more, but you're able to get by with this stock accessory belt as well, and that plugs it up nice and easy, and it looks nice and clean from there. Nice.
And I noticed you're keeping the AC, yes. Which Barry will be as well, but not me. I'm thinking right now. So what are the challenges with keeping the AC since you're going into a B7 chassis?
So yeah, you can't use the 2.7 AC compressor. You're going to want to use something from a 3-liter or 2-liter from my understanding. Now I don't have any of my lines plugged in to see how they all route, but from my understanding is that 3-liter or the 2.7 compressor works with their respective lines, and not until I get this all loaded up will I see how that kind of goes. There's like a trigger line, or for your harness is a trigger wire that you need to wire into almost the plenum of the car, but I haven't gotten there yet, so I've got to still figure that out.
Okay, cool. And in terms of the snub mount, this is obviously different than the 2.7 mount, yeah. Or is this the 2.7 mount?
No, that's a 3-liter.
Okay.
So I believe the 3. I've never done the check, but the 3.2 I think is the same. But anyways, this is specifically from a 3-liter, and yeah, you're definitely gonna want that snub mount bracket. And I believe this has to match whatever's on your radiator side as well.
Now, in terms of mounting this into your B7, with regards to that snub mount, the rad carrier, because you have the 3.2 rad carrier, that just works directly with that snub mount?
That's my understanding. So the 3 liter snub mount with a 3.2 rad carrier, should all bolt together. Motor mounts, I mean motor mounts from a B5 all the way to B7, all the exact same. So you could, there's so many options on what stiffness you want, so you can pick whatever you want.
So are these stock 3 liter or 3.2 liter motor mounts? Or?
Yeah, I want to say it's been a while since I've ordered them, but I want to say they're just stock 3 liter motor mounts, 3 liter from a B6. I didn't want to go with anything poly or solid. I wanted to kind of keep it somewhat comfortable.
And your valve covers here are very nice. So you've obviously done a powder coating job on those. What else have you changed, and how are these different from the stock 2.7 ones?
Yeah, so these valve covers came from a 2.8, the very early 2.8. I can't remember the motor designation, over in UK, and yeah, they're different in the sense that they don't have any of the PVC bulges that come up here. They're all nice and smooth and flat, and they bolt right on, and they're kind of hard to find, but you can find them out there for sure.
And I noticed you've got an interesting oil cap here. Tell me the story on that.
Yeah, so the original oil cap location for the specific set of valve covers, the oil cap is a big kind of extrusion right here and wouldn't allow the coil pack to seat perpendicular in a line. And then maybe this is my OCD taking over, but I wanted to make sure that I could get my coil packs all in a line with maybe some conduit going into it. So I used, I believe, 2 passenger side valve covers, and then had this welded in after the fact as just a generic universal oil caps. That way now everything's in a line and looking perpendicular, because part of the challenge is that the motor's got to look good, and hopefully that might
well, I think they look fantastic.
Yeah,
personally. Next thing to look at, we've got 2.8 exhaust manifolds here, and the reason for that is
for single turbo.
So you've gone single turbo. Where does all this hardware come from?
All right, we'll start with the piping. All the stuff here came from XSPower. They had a sale on eBay, and I grabbed that, and I wrapped it obviously after the fact, and I still have this pipe to do, but it's all a kit that comes with all this piping, and yeah, it's a fairly inclusive.
So this guy's your up pipe. It's gonna bolt up to the 2.8 manifolds.
Yep, it's gonna bolt up to the 2.8 manifolds. It comes up here, and I've got a tile blow-off valve or wastegate here that I've got a mount that sneaks in under the intake manifold, and then at the top here is where you end up mounting your turbo, and this would be your wastegate pipe that comes off the
your dump tube. So
yeah,
are you gonna route your dump tube into the exhaust, or you're just gonna let it free ball?
Yeah, right to atmosphere is kind of the current setup is what I'm gonna be doing. I mean, nice. the way the piping comes together, yeah, you'd have to do some custom welding to get your dump tube into your exhaust, so it's gonna be out to atmosphere for now.
These clamps here that are pretty nice. Where did you get those? Those are just stainless steel kind of zip ties, I guess?
Yes. Just again, I got all the stuff. I can't remember the manufacturer I got it from, and they had some stainless steel zip ties that you just kind of curl on, and that was actually a lot of fun to put on. It's my first time doing it, so.
Nice. So let's talk about this big unit now.
Yeah, this is a BorgWarner S257 turbo, and I don't know much more about it other than that. It's 5761. It's gonna put out a lot of power is all I know. And it's gonna...
So, your stock internal, so what kind of power are we looking at making here?
Okay, so this thing is good or rated for up to 625 horsepower.
Is that wheel or crank?
That's crank. And, you know, there's... My stock internals are rated up to about 500. So I'm not gonna be maximizing this turbo, which is gonna be nice because I don't want it to be screaming all the time. So it's gonna be dialed back with a tune to try to put out about 500. So I'm hoping to be able to achieve that with this fairly easily.
Now I noticed that you have is this T3 flange on the turbo, and then you've got a V-band on your up pipe here. So
yeah, and there's an adapter that you can get that goes from this this PE or Precision Engineering V-band to the T3, and it's just a little collar that kind of raises it up about 3/4 of an inch, and you'll be able to bolt it all together. I still have yet.
This dump tube, or this downpipe, I should say, is massive.
Yeah, there's nothing small about that. Apparently, this fits without having to bang in the firewall. We'll see if that's actually true. I mean, it's gigantic. This has to go between the motor and the firewall. It's absolutely massive. Like it's like 4 inches almost.
Yeah.
3.5.
That's a really nice setup for sure. I'm going to be very curious to see with that bigger turbo, because your competition, obviously, the other two motors are going to be twin turbo. I'm running a KO4 XSPower billet turbo setup, and Barry's doing some genuine BorgWarner KO4s.
Yes.
So it's going to be very interesting to see the difference in spool between those two setups and this big turbo, single turbo, and see, you know, how they stack up.
What are you guys doing for internals? You guys are keeping it all stock.
So
right?
I'm doing stock internal, and that's going to be, you know, limiting my power. Obviously, I think even with just the KO4s, I think that's going to be a bit limited.
Yeah.
Barry with his KO4s, and he's doing rods, I think.
Yeah, he's got
so
rods.
he's got rods, and maybe just in the tune, like my tune versus his will have to be a little bit softer, and then hopefully I can still make the top end power that he's going to make, because I think at the top end we're going to be limited by the size of the turbos themselves, but he might be able to push a little bit more in the mid-range with those rods. Yeah. So in terms of the clutch and flywheel arrangement that you've got going on here, what have you done?
This setup is just a TTV flywheel. It's metal or steel, so it's not aluminum. It's a little bit lighter than a stock. It's still single mass, but still a little bit lighter than the dual mass flywheel setup, but still heavier than all the lightweight stuff out there. So hopefully it doesn't introduce too much chatter. And I've just got a RS4 clutch and kind of.
So this would be B7 RS4 clutch and pressure plate.
Correct.
Right? And then the TTV flywheel is custom made to adapt the 2.7 sort of crank bolt pattern to the RS4 clutch and pressure plate.
Yep, you got it.
Right. So these have to be special ordered.
Yeah, they're special ordered right from the UK. You can go to TTV and they're very accommodating. You tell them exactly what you're planning to do, and they tell you exactly what you need, kind of thing. So it's
awesome. Nice.
It's a real nice piece as well.
Yeah.
And
yeah, it's gorgeous.
It holds up nice.
And the reason you chose to go for a little bit heavier flywheel as opposed to a lightweight flywheel is there a particular reason, or?
It's because lightweight flywheels suck. They're terrible. Unless it's a racing application, they're not fun on the street.
So having a look at the top of the motor here, I also see some changes to your venting solution here in the middle. What have we changed up here?
Yeah, so there's kind of some clearance issues here with the turbo, the way it's mounted. Single turbo comes in here, and you got a blow-off valve in here, so things get kind of really tight. And I was really looking to try to manage the PVC or PCV system and avoid using the catch cans. So I ended up cutting off the back of this breather here that ends up going up to your intake, and had these bungs welded on, so that way the valve covers can come into here, and this will come up whichever way. Once I get the intake and all that situated, it'll come up to the intake, and hopefully that kind of keeps it nice and stealthy and clean and low profile.
Yeah, and some good venting too, because, you know, like you were saying, with a bit of a concern with these valve covers might be the crankcase venting, and this might help having a extra ports. And...
Exactly, yeah. With it all coming down into here, inside this cap, there's a big kind of chamber in here where all the vapors have to come in and around, kind of like a mini labyrinth in there, and hopefully that separates the oil and air.
Nice.
We'll see how that works.
And then in terms of your intake setup, are you going to be using just a stock 2.7 intake manifold?
Yeah, it's going to be a stock, late style 2.7 intake manifold. I'm going to modify the bottom of it to get all my air hoses into it, but other than that, it's going to be a stock intake manifold with, I'm going to start out with stock injectors for now. And then once I get the tune sorted, I'll end up upgrading the injectors.
Just the last thing I want to cover, Blake, in the engine bay here, you know, I noticed you've got some wiring that's cut up and some changes being made. In terms of putting the 2.7 into the B7 chassis, with regards to ABS and electronics, what are you going to have to do and change in order to get that motor in here?
Yeah, mechanically, it slips right in fairly easily. Like I say, the motor mounts bolt right up. I've got an automatic subframe, actually, as you'll notice. I've got automatic mounts there as well.
Yeah.
And you have the option whenever you're doing this is whether or not you want to use those side mounts, which gives you more clearance for your downpipes, or if you go with the manual one that has that big kind of crossover tube.
B6 has had that
crossover.
Cross member.
Correct,
right?
You're right. Yeah, the B6s had the crossover mounts. So I'm keeping it to the old ones. That way it gives me more clearance for my downpipe going kind of buy the transmission there.
Right.
So other things that you have to do is you're gonna want all this stuff from B5S4, which is your coolant, your heater core pipes, your power steering. That stuff all just bolts in, so it's gonna be your supply, and your return is gonna be from B5S4. The air box is from a 3-liter actually, so that way
So that would be a B6 A4 with a 3-liter motor.
Yep.
Gives you that air box that fits in the B7 chassis.
Exactly, and this is a 2.7 MAF, so it plugs right in real nice. It's gonna give that kind of OEM look, accordion pipe to the turbo, and then off to the races. Now the ABS is kind of the most trickiest thing that you have to do. So being that this was a B7 chassis, this module is from a B6, as are all these lines for the front and rear. I had to swap all those out so that way you can incorporate the B6 module. And then I have to cut the B7. I still haven't done this yet. I still have to cut this right off and plug in a B6 connector so that way you can plug in. And then also have to install a yaw sensor from a B6 in the dash and wire it all the way up to here and plug it all in. So there's a little bit of wiring there. It's not, it looks daunting. It's not that bad. It's just time really is all that it comes down to. Other than that, it should bolt right in. And then I've still got to figure out the wiring for the ECU. And there's options out there where you can buy a kit online, Project 27 or something like that. I can't remember what it is, but they're in Canadian dollars. It's about $1,500 just to get that little splice harness.
Well, it's just a jumper harness, so it has like B5S4 plugs on one side,
right,
and then B7 or B6 plugs on the other
whichever
side,
one
right?
you choose, right? Yeah, so they make it for you, but $1,500, I'm gonna avoid that and give it a go myself and see if I can make it myself. There's other things to consider, where it's like your relay fan, the relays for the fans and all that stuff, so it can be complicated. Oh, the starter cable, I'm gonna try to keep this original to the 3.2. It's much beefier than your 2.7 cable. I think this is like a
Is that because 3.2s are so much more difficult to start? Yeah. And you can never get them to run properly, so they have to have a beefier starter setup?
Yeah, they're gonna...
So that they can have that really long crank?
That's right, because the 3.2s suck.
I see you've done some powder coating on your subframe there as well?
Yeah, the subframe came out with the motor originally, with the 3.2, took it all out, ripped out the subframe mounts, sent it out for powder coating, and dropped in some new subframe mounts. So everything's nice and new. And
that's right. And we have a video about the subframe mount replacement. So if you check it out, I'll post a link in the screen here somewhere. You guys can click on that if you want to see the process of removing those subframe bushings and replacing them.
Another thing you want to consider is your return line. So the 3.2 is returnless, so it doesn't have a return fuel line going all the way back to the tank, whereas the 2.7 does, and your fuel pressure regulator on 2.7 is on your intake, whereas the 3.2 it's in the fuel filter. So what I did is I grabbed a 3-liter return line. So this is right from a 3-liter B6 3-liter, goes all the way down, hard line all the way to the back, right to the fuel filter, and then you just need to make your connections back there. But that is how I'm going about getting my return. Guys just take AN lines and just shoot it all the way to the back. You can do that as well, but this is nice because everything clicks into all the OEM connectors.
Yeah, and it looks factory.
Exactly.
So if you guys are looking to do a B7 swap or a 2.7 swap into a B7, make sure you subscribe to the channel, because we're going to be posting all these videos as we go and seeing all the different parts that are going to end up in this B7 chassis from the 2.7 swap process.
And that's what we're going to do right now, is drop in the motor, hopefully.
Well, we got to bolt that transmission up, but just in a minute, yes. Now, Blake, last thing in terms of transmission here, obviously you're going to an O&E. This thing would have had a slush box in it before.
Yep.
So what did you have to do for this transmission in terms of getting it ready? Obviously you've done some powder coating here too, or some painting to make it look really good. You also had the transmission apart?
Yeah, because it came from a junkyard, it came from a B6 3-liter, and we didn't know, we never felt it run. So what I did was replace the 1-2 synchro and the shift collar. And to do that, you have to take the entire transmission apart. It's essentially the last pieces to come out. So everything has to come apart. I sent it out for sandblasting, and then I actually just painted it and POR 15 and painted the whole thing and slammed it all back together. So it feels nice by rotating the collar or the rod here, and hopefully when I slip it back in, it does what it needs to do.
Now, in terms of the swap, what do you have to do for the drive shaft? Is there anything special?
Yeah, so the drive shaft, the automatic drive shaft is too long. You want to use your B6 3-liter drive shaft along with it. I don't know what else is compatible, what it shares it with. So I've got the 3-liter B6 drive shaft loaded into the car right now. And the rear differential, the final drive of that differential needs to match your front diff as well. So I took the rear differential from that donor car as well. It's already put into there. Your automatic diff is no good. I think the final drive on those are 310, whereas this is a 411. So that's what you want. You want to make sure you match your rear diff with your front diff.
Awesome.
Oh, and actually the center differential, I put the JHM center shims or
Right, that's right.
1 mod.
Yeah, so if you have again, I'll throw a link up in the video right here, so you can click on that if you want to go check out, and that's a set of shims that increase the amount of the torque bias or
Correct.
even out the torque bias front to rear.
I'm not too sure exactly how it
Okay.
works, but I installed them.
The internet said this was good, so they're in the transition now.
So it's gonna act more like a rear bias kind of vehicle versus
Closer to a rear wheel drive
Exactly,
in terms of
yeah.
power distribution, right?
So
Okay.
that center diff's loaded in, and it's good to go.
Awesome. So at that point, after making sure the clutch was installed properly and everything was torqued down, we were able to throw the transmission on the back of the motor and pick that motor up, and then with the snow falling, move that motor over into position and get it into the car. Took us about 20 minutes to get it installed, but everything went really smoothly. It's just important to take your time, make tiny little adjustments as you get that motor in, that way you don't crush anything or scratch any of his fancy new paint up. And then Beauty 2.7 motor installed into the B7. Still a lot of work to do, obviously, but shouldn't be too bad, and it's going to be a really cool car once it's finished. So if you like this kind of stuff, make sure you subscribe to the channel, follow our videos. We'll be posting a lot more updates on this project, and then hopefully in not too long we'll be able to get some videos of us driving around with our 2.7s.